This is the technical tools for asset management and operations, and it's real examples from permittees. So these are guys that are doing what we're doing in the field, and they have some real good information to share with you. So I'll bring up Don first.
Well, good afternoon. So you all know I'm Don Robinett. I'm the Stormwater Manager with the City of SeaTac, and this is a long-winded title, so it's about utilizing asset management database systems to meet NPDES requirements. I was just checking to see if you're asleep yet. No? Okay. All right, so the challenge. We all have been through one permit cycle, starting on the next cycle, and we've been doing stormwater management for a while. But with these regulatory requirements, not only do we have to do it, we have to track it and we have to report it. And it's a very time-intensive, labor-intensive process to track all this information and to gather it up and report it once a year. So the City of SeaTac decided that rather than having a paper process that was so time-consuming and really not useful to us beyond meeting our regulatory requirements, because we really couldn't analyze the data and get benefit from it other than compliance, we decided to take approach of installing a GIS integrated database system. And our initial focus was meeting our IDDE requirements, both investigation and enforcement, as well as post-construction, operation, and maintenance. So we're talking private storm system inspections, public storm system inspections, and enforcement. So our project goals. We wanted to develop a standardized approach for tracking and reporting. We wanted to geolink it, so not only did we want the data, we want it tied to real assets in real space in the field. We wanted a useful and reliable database with consistent data we could query. And we wanted to improve the quality of data and tracking that we're getting. So, if we send our folks out in the field to do inspections, they could write in a variety of different notes or different phrasing, and it's hard to quantify that. So we tried to standardize it. And so what the picture is showing you here is we're really trying to go from this paper system to an electronic system that's a lot more efficient. So choosing the tool for the job. We did want to go with the GIS integrated database. There were several systems on the market when we were shopping around. ViewWorks, Hansen, Cartograph, CityWorks, just to name a few. And our primary considerations when we chose the database system we went with was GIS compatibility with our existing GIS system. So this is really important because I was blessed when I came to the City of SeaTac to have a well-established and great GIS team. So if you want to go this direction and you want to use a integrated database, you want to have a good foundation, a good GIS foundation. The other things we looked at were functionality and costs. So when it came down to it, costs, CityWorks was about middle of the road, but it had what we thought the best functionality and definitely the best compatibility with the Esri GIS system. So one thing we learned as soon as we bought the system, we knew it before we bought the system, that the custom forms out of the box didn't meet our needs. So we had to customize. So we created customized forms for IDDE, for public inspections, private inspections, post-storm inspections, and currently we're in the process of developing catch basin inspection and catch basin maintenance forms, as well as reports for each of these different forms. So let's dive right into it. Let's take a look at our IDDE and spill hotline tracking. So we have a public face for our complaint system, if you will. or service request system. We've named it SeaTac Click and Request. So beyond sending emails in or having people come to the counter or making phone calls to submit requests or complaints, we have a web form on the main web page, and that's where the red arrow is pointing up there. And we also have developed a smartphone application. It's city sourced, but it's another way that citizens and business owners can submit requests to the city. So this is just a brief glimpse of what our web form looks like, really basic. Describe your problem and enter your information, or just click anonymous, and it all goes through. This is a brief look at our phone app. You can tie the complaint or request to a space in the real world. You pick from a list of types of requests. You type in or verbally describe the problem you see. You can also take a picture or a video of the problem and submit it. And it all comes in and creates an entry in our database, just automated, comes right in, and it generates an automatic email to our gatekeeper, which is our Public Works admin. And what she does is she just takes a look at it, makes sure it's a real request and not somebody joking around, and basically assigns it, reads it, assigns it to a department. The department receives it, and they assign it to a staff member. So when the staff member sees gets an email notification, which once again is automatic as soon as they're assigned a request, they open up CityWorks and they're looking at their inbox and a map of the city with a location of where the problem is, and they can zoom in to get more detail. And each dot is a active request. So there's several panels within the service request form. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but it'll give you an idea of what kind of things we are tracking through the database. This is the main panel, the service request panel. We're using it for all citywide complaints, as well as our IDDE complaints and our spill hotline tracking. And it tracks all the actions that we're taking in response to these complaints, as well as which department it's been submitted to, when it was submitted, as well as which staff member is responsible for responding to the complaint. Another primary panel is the request panel. It's pretty straightforward. Type in the address, but this is where you geo-link your request into our database, and it ties it to that real space and time, which is very important for future analysis. It also allows you to give a little more detail on the location, but not much beyond that we're utilizing at least. Caller panel is pretty straightforward. Anything you need to know about the caller, you enter here. But this is the real workhorse for the service request form in the city. This is our custom fields panel. This is where we put all the data that we needed for NPDES compliance, as well as what we need to be able to manage or better manage our programs. So first you'll notice that some of the fields are highlighted in red. We don't like to say pink, so it's red. Those are mandatory fields. And then we have a variety of other data we're tracking in here, from mode of requests to property owner to if it's tied to a construction permit. What are the findings of your investigation? We have a drop-down menu for picking a type of request. All of the IDDE info, such as, is this a stormwater issue? If it is it a water quality issue? And if it's a water quality issue, does it represent a threat to public health, safety, or the environment? Then we have that information to send to ecology, and we also have a box is, did you notify ecology? So all of this, all the important tracking information for NPDES compliance is right here. This is just a zoom in on the pick list for the taken via mode because we wanted to know who was submitting the requests, who's submitting the complaints, so we can better understand the source and where the problem's coming from. This is a small portion of our monstrously long pick list for the type of complaint. Every department created a series of pick lists, and every department, and even in some cases, every department in every division, so we could better track and query the types of requests we're getting. So let's jump ahead and look at what we did with our stormwater inspection forms. Now, we're calling them inspection forms, but what we used was the work order forms out of CityWorks. They had greater flexibility and they had more customization built into it. So before we go out in the field to do an inspection, we open up our map system, we zoom in on the area that we want to do the inspections until we can see the assets. You can notice there's a bunch of little numbers floating around next to the purple lines. So every individual catch basin structure has an asset number that we're tying to this inspection. Once we zoomed in far enough, we just draw a box around it and select it, changing it to blue. And now that automatically ties it, geolinks it to the inspection so we can map out where we've done our inspections. Once we've created selected the assets, we create a new work order and print the form. This is a print version of the form. This is what our maintenance staff takes out in the field, does the inspection, brings it back into the office, hands it off to an admin, and she enters it into our database system. But the beauty of this is all of those custom fields that we put in for NPDES tracking are now showing up on this print form, so we can get all that data entered in. Another thing we did, because it's hard to remember all the requirements, we have a printout on the back of each inspection form on the timeliness requirements to make sure that any maintenance is being done in a timely manner and we're meeting those regulations. Also, each inspection form has a map of the facility and all of the structures. So we know where to look, we know where we're supposed to find them, even if they're covered in asphalt. This is our custom fields box for our stormwater inspections. And as you can see, we've got mandatory fields again, notations to be able to track corrections, whether or not we're going to be able to issue a swim rebate. We offer a 25% rebate if you have a detention facility and you maintain it every year, as well as whether or not there was the inspector noticed an IDDE violation and the number and types of structures they inspected. So jumping ahead to our field screening form. This is for illicit discharges and detection. This is what you don't want to see in the field. So once again, it's the same thing in terms of creating it in the map. This is a sample of our print form. We're using the EPA model in terms of our dry weather field screening, so these questions should look pretty familiar. But all the data is there that we need to track. And once they do the inspection, or the field screening in this case, they come back to the office and enter in the data into, once again, the custom form. This is, again, the workhorse for the field screening form. But you can see we've got point of observation, what receiving water it goes into, when was the most recent rainfall, what's the dominant land use type, to indicators from staining, color, and even if we're going to do test strips, chemical field screening for detergents, chlorine, fluorine, ammonia, fluoride and ammonia, whether or not we need to send it into the lab to get additional analysis done, an indication of whether or not an illicit discharge was found, and if an illicit discharge was found, what service request number are we going to be tracking enforcement on? So it's all there. So reports and reporting. This is a key element for meeting your NPDES requirements, as I mentioned. The paper tracking system is pretty ominous. It's pretty easy to track it, but at the end of the year, when you need to ask each department and each division to submit the numbers, they have to go through each paper, each individual inspection form, and pull out the appropriate data. It's very time consuming, easily an 8-hour job or better, depending on the size of your project. So we've created IDDE field screening reports. We have a general NPDES tracking report, and that's all of our other IDDE work. And we have a maintenance inspection report that handles our spot checks, our public inspections, and our private inspections. Reporting's very simple. If I want to know what a report is, I just click on the tab that says reports. It provides me a list of reports to choose from. I check the box, I enter in a date range, and then it prints me a lovely little report. Now, mind you, the data is only as good as what's being entered. So I'll be lying to you if I tell you all I have to do every year is print the report. I print the report, I review the data, and if the data's a little suspect, I have to bring it back to the division managers to look at and see what went wrong and fix the data and enter it correctly. But it is so much simpler and so much easier to do. It's a substantial time savings. The other beauty of the system is being able to map your compliance. So this is a map that we printed out last year after 1 year's worth of dry weather field screening under the new permit. We were able to field screen over 30% of our MS4 in one season. And so the light blue areas are areas we've already done. The purple areas are existing MS4 that remains. And this is the southern half of the city. Here's an example of what our IDDE report looks like. You got your spill hotline data, the number of service requests, number of actions taken for each type of request, the source of the request, how it came in. All of this information, not all this information is required under the NPDES permit, but it's all useful. Here's an example of our stormwater inspection report. We use the same general form with a different title for public, private, and spot check inspections. But it does clearly map out we have our maintenance sections laid out, so we know how many inspections we did by maintenance, the number of public facilities we inspected, number of private facilities, and even a list of each location that we inspected and the inspection number that's immediately tied to it. So one of the benefits that we got out of taking it from a paper system to a electronic GIS-centric system? Well, first and foremost, we're getting consistent data now. Since we're using more drop-down menus and we have established forms and processes and the same people entering the data, you get a lot more consistent results and reliable results. And as I mentioned, it really is a lifesaver when it comes down to annual reporting. Life's a breeze for me when it comes to annual reporting. Instead of 1 month of stress, I have a week of stress. So that's a huge improvement. All of our inspections and field screening are geolinked, so we can map it and understand what's done on a geographic level. In addition to that, because we have all of this additional data, we have the ability to query this data, to ask questions that we can't ask to a stack of papers. We can now ask the database and get answers we can use to refine our programs. So the expression I like to use is, with a database system, your information is just a query away. You get to frame the question. So this is an example of one management level analysis we did. This is a map of all illicit discharges in the city as of, about a month ago. Each dot represents a location of an illicit discharge. Each number in the dot shows a grouping of illicit discharges. So you might notice in the middle of the screen the red dot that says 15. We're seeing a huge concentration in that one location or right in that area that we're not seeing in the rest of the city. So it tells us we want to dig a little deeper. So once we do, and we highlight where I modified the search and said, let's see how many of them were oil discharges or oil leaks or fuel leaks. Doing that discharge, we found that over 30% of those 15 were oil. And when I dug further, we found that most of these were tied to automotive accidents. So we can't really educate on automotive accidents. We can just prepare our staff on how best to clean them up. But you can get an indication of what type of information you can get out of your database and how useful it could be. So lessons learned. So one of the biggest challenges and lessons we learned from adopting this database system is change does not come easy. Staff is resistant to doing anything differently. But if you identify the importance and how useful the information is and what this can do to simplify their job, it's a better sell. But one of the key things that help make it work in our Public Works Department is our division head bought into this hook, line, and sinker. Every division within our department thoroughly trained. We review these reports on an annual basis to see how everybody's doing. And here's one of the scary things, we can track response time through this. So we have to look and see how fast we're responding to customer complaints. Another factor is garbage in, garbage out. We initially started with everybody entering their own data. Data was inconsistent, shockingly. So limiting the entry of data to a few or fewer members of staff really improved the data. It wasn't quite as efficient as we liked, but it certainly improved the quality of data. Another thing we learned is when you're creating these forms, you don't necessarily have to geolink them. And about 30% of the staff were not geolinking them. And so we were missing half the picture on these inspections. We couldn't really use it as a management tool except for looking at numbers. But if we wanted to target areas, it was a lot more difficult. So there was a big learning curve and retraining we went through to get everybody to geolink these systems. Now there is one other thing that I would advise any jurisdiction that's going forward with this or wants to pursue a GIS integrated database system. Make sure you have a strong IT and GIS system. While using the customized forms is fairly simple, trying to develop these forms yourself and change programs within it, I have to rely heavily on our IT and GIS staff, and they're a godsend. So that's pretty much it for my presentation.
All right, the next presentation here is private facility inspections, and the presenter is Dan Repp from the City of Shoreline.
For those of you who don't know the City of Shoreline, we're located just north of the City of Seattle. We basically, our southern border matches up with their northern border. We're about 53,000 people and have several hundred miles of storm drain lines and ditches, and just like probably most people do. Topics for today, we're going to talk about private facility inspections, the process, the way we used to do it and the way we do it now. Talk a little bit about reporting. We'll talk about the cost that took us to implement the system, and then we'll talk about benefits and lessons learned. So the private facility map for us looks something like this. We have about 281 private facilities that we inspect, so pretty typical for most jurisdictions. Just to give folks a little look at what our paper process used to resemble. If you're confused by this, so were we. So we decided to do something differently. In essence, what was going on here is we had a couple of different databases that tracked what we did. We had a work order system and the Hanson software that basically tracked the work order process, and then we had a database system that tracked the information about each of the facilities that we would be doing inspections on. From there, we would generate a paper inspection form, and then the inspection would be conducted. That information would have to go back into the separate databases, and then if there was compliance issues, we had to actually, go in, do various merges and using Excel, and then ultimately putting it into a Word file for letter or compliance letters out to the various facility owners if we needed to do something there. So as you can see, fairly complex, lots of different steps, and lots of paper involved. So as we started to look at this process, we definitely wanted to go digital. We heard about CityWorks software from the previous presenter. That's essentially the same system that we're using. For all the reasons you heard previously, those are a lot of the reasons why we chose it. We wanted a spatial system that had both the spatial attributes and the asset data combined into one database as opposed to being separate. We wanted to be able to have a process that was streamlined. We wanted to reduce administrative costs. As you saw before, there's lots of complexity and lots of time that went into doing that previous paper system. One of the things we wanted to do is field friendly. We wanted it to be go mobile, go home. And so that's the direction we've gone. Everything we do in the field now is digital. We don't take any paper in the field. We wanted to be able to reduce inspection time and also reduce some of the frustrations we had in our previous systems for maps, not being able to look at histories in real time, adaptable system, and then be able to provide tailored reports not only for ourselves, but for our customers, and then of course for reporting on the NPDES side of things. One of the critical things for folks to think about if you're going to go down this path is conducting a detailed workflow analysis. Clearly this slide has a lot of complexity to it, but the reason I put it in here is because I wanted to show folks that if you're going to go down this path and really look at your inspection program or any process that you do, you really need to take the time to do a breakdown of your workflow. And that there's many steps. It's an iterative process. It takes a lot of time, but one of the big benefits of doing that is that in the end, you have a product that works really well and that you've covered most of your bases for conducting your business. So looking at what the inspection looks like today, as I mentioned, it's go digital or go home. We don't take paper into the field. We take handheld devices out in the field. They're, again, using, in this case, the CityWorks systems. We have real-time access to all of our spatial data. We can edit things in the field. And basically, when the folks go out and do their inspections, they're collecting information. If they see inconsistencies, they can change that in the field. And then as they come back, we've actually set it up so we can generate our compliance notifications right out of the system. So if we do need to send a customer a note that they need to conduct some activities, then we basically it's almost like hitting one button and boom, we can generate that report and get it sent to the customer. So as we heard mentioned before, maps are a real important aspect of this system. So most folks know that in the past we rely a lot on paper maps, and we were no different. So this is just essentially a look at what our maps looked like before we went digital. So we had a binder for each facility. We had hand-drawn maps. And it was interesting because we had one employee, temporary helps folks, that they wanted to know who NTS was. For those who don't know, that's not to scale. So not a person. So what do the maps look like today? So again, when we're in the field, this is all digital. This is what the folks are looking at. So this is what the maps look like today. We have digital maps that are available to us real time. And then when we do need to print out something for the customers to consider, again, in our reports, you can see that the printed copy is pretty clear and shows facilities and the systems that are in the facilities as well, or are on the property as well. So as I mentioned before, when we generate our notifications to facility owners if we have a compliance issue, we have formatted letters already in place that are already canned, and then we just marry that up with the inspection report, and then we go ahead and send that out to our various customers and follow up with whatever compliance meetings or whatever we need to do to get that system back in play. As we heard earlier, that one of the big benefits of this is providing reports to comply with our NPDES requirements. And this gives you a sense of how long it takes us to generate a report for our NPDES notifications, and basically we're doing on the order of 5 minutes for report generation to satisfy our requirements, which is great. And again, we heard about tracking IDDE incidents. Again, really quick for us to generate these reports. And I also wanted to say that it's going back to the slide that I was showing, the workflow analysis. The reason we're able to do this is because we spent the time up front to go through in detail, agonizing detail I might add, to determine what steps we need to have completed during these inspection process and then build them into the system. So that's kind of I want to emphasize that, because if you don't go down that path, you'll really struggle at the end. Talking about some of the benefits that we've experienced, clearly better maps, better maps for our field staff, better maps for our customers, and that's been a real bonus for us. Tightening of inspection practices. One of the big complaints folks have had over the years is they would get out, they'd have a hand-drawn map, they couldn't find the facilities, et cetera, and they had no way, and they don't know what anybody else had done out in the field in previous inspections. We have that ability now. We have the ability to edit maps, as I mentioned before. We have clear pictures. We have references, so if we're unclear about something, we can zoom out. We can see the facility in the context of the rest of the stormwater system. A real benefit. We also, again, when we were looking at our catch basin inspection programs, because again, if we're out doing our regular facilities inspections, we might be looking at our catch basins as well, so we can combine efforts. And reduce administrative errors. We mentioned before, consistent data entry is a real benefit from having these systems, particularly if you're doing everything in the field with field tablets and you have clear drop downs and access to predetermined answers to specific questions. And then, of course, more complete records. So, of course, some more benefits for those who like to play with digital toys. There's lots of that out there. Our crews love them. We're doing all of our inspections using digital equipment, no paper, in the field. Another benefit that we've been able to use or gain from this system is basically developing routes for our inspection process. So we can look at, where have we done inspections, where do we need to do them. If we've gone out to an area one day and we're not complete, it's easy for us to look at the data and be able to go back out and restart our efforts without much lost time. So this has been a real benefit for our field staff to just systematically go through the city, and we divide the city up into thirds when we look at this, but real positive for time saving there. So just some overall costs. When we did this city work implementation, we started it up with just our surface water group. And we were able to use Department of Ecology grant monies to essentially pay for the entire operation to get it up and running. And you can see here the cost elements that were involved. But it was, we didn't have to spend a lot of money to get the city work system up and running for the surface water group. Just as an aside, we are now taking it all the way up through the Public Works Department and deploying it out through the Public Works Department, our Parks Department, and our Facilities Department as well. So that's a much bigger price tag than this one, but in this case for just the surface waters, is what it cost us. So, lessons learned. Again, I'll emphasize the workflow. Got to do this, otherwise you'll really not get to the value that you can really achieve with these systems. And we heard this before, understanding the resources necessary to make the change. Some folks are resistant to this, and they need to be brought along in the idea. Involve the field staff in the configuration. Again, we've had a benefit of having some field staff that have been real excited about this, and they took off with it and basically set the whole program, all the field operations, and they helped tailor-make their inspection forms, and really have been beneficial and instrumental in changing the way that we set up the system. And of course, be flexible, because you're going to start this thing up and you're going to have challenges along the way, and you need to be able to respond to that. And of course, commitment. It takes time to put this system in place. Again, the workflow planning is a very time-consuming effort, and it's very boring, frankly, but you've got to be committed to get through that to get to the real benefits that these systems provide. And that's it.
I'm Mark Presler, King County Stormwater Mapping Coordinator, and today I'm presenting the Outfall and Discharge Point Screening application. And we are using this on iOS and Android devices. You can use it on tablets or smartphones. We happen to be using it on iPhones. And just a presentation agenda. I want to give an overview of the stormwater framework, which is what we're using for our data structure for King County. And I also want to go over the new definitions that Ecology has provided in their guidance document. And then finally give you some screenshots of the application. And it's a lot of topics, so we have all of it available on the Washington Stormwater Center website. And to my left, we also have a poster presentation that you might want to check out that has all of the tools we built on the framework. So first, an analogy. You may be challenged to tell where this is located by the scramble of puzzle pieces here. But if I show you the next slide with all the puzzle pieces put together, it's easy to see this is Puget Sound. And basically that captures the vision of the stormwater framework, because the puzzle pieces are our terms and definitions in the framework. And having common terms and definitions then allows us to have a common data structure that we can all query if we're using the same one, and it allows us to share terms and definitions and technologies. And so that gets me right to the specific goals of the stormwater framework, to improve compatibility of data across jurisdictions, to create a standard dictionary, and decrease the effort and cost of mapping the system. And just to give you a little background on the stormwater framework, it was born of an Ecology Gross grant in 2012, and the deliverables were a stormwater dictionary. And the real big goal of that was to have terms and definitions that were equal. And we had 36 jurisdictions working together on this stormwater dictionary. And it was a really great effort, and we learned so much in the process. And then that translated to a stormwater framework that was also one of the deliverables. And this basically is a chart that provides the functional the hierarchy, the functional hierarchy of all the components in the system. So here you can see convey, control, connect, and concept, which is what I'm talking about today in the discharge points and outfalls. And so that's the foundation of the framework, really, those definitions and terms and how they fit together. And from that, it was just a great resource. King County then developed a database, and it's a bit small, but basically this is our GIS database that's based upon that framework and all the same categories. And I also want to thank WashDOT. They've been a really great resource for advice along the way. And from that, we've been able to come up with actually quite a few tools. I'm presenting one particular tool today, but we have a tablet application that we're using to map all of our stormwater features, and a number of others that are also on the poster presentation. And again, I just want to give a plug that you can download them all for free on the Washington Stormwater website. And so then to the definitions. The really important point here is that with the new definitions that ecology has provided us in the guidance document, outfalls discharge to receiving waters, and discharge points are discharging to ground or to another entity's stormwater system. And so then that brings me to the actual application. But let me just say, the reason ecology wanted to clarify these definitions was because without that clarity, everyone was collecting these in their own manner. Even within King County, our various agencies were collecting in different ways. And now having better technology, a unified application, common terms and definitions, we're now able to get standard data, which is of course much more powerful. So this happens to be an iPhone screen capture right here. And it just shows that I've highlighted the project here for stormwater outfall and discharge point screening. And this is a very familiar looking map. The big blue dot happens to be the inspector location, so this is also great for a navigation tool. It takes them right to the location they're going to. All the smaller dots are the outfalls and discharge points. And this application also serves to help us reclassify our locations, because what we've done is we're considering all of our outfalls still outfalls. However, as we go through screening 12% of our system every year as our phase 1 permit requires, we're re-verifying as we work through them, so we know if it's discharging to receiving waters or if it's a discharge point for the new terminology. So you can see there's a light blue selected outfall there, and if I go to the data entry screen, it happens to be outfalling to receiving waters, in this case a lake, and it has the date inspected and the inspector, and there's actually a lot of other information here that corresponds. If you went to the IDDE screening demonstration yesterday, a lot of the same categories you would find in there. And of course you can modify this very easily to fit if there's something else that you want to capture that's not in here. And then also for documentation purposes, as we've heard so much today in audits and other ways, that it's just very important to document your information. And you can take a photo or a video right here, and all of the data is centralized, and so we're using reporting services here to see when we've actually met that permit requirement. And really the benefit there is that the data becomes usable when it's centralized and accessible. And also having the data entry screen with the drop-downs, as many of the other presenters were saying, it just really increases the quality of the data. The person's able to fill out all the information while they're standing there with their iPhone, and you'll never get a better view of the information. And the drop-downs, of course, make the data standard. And before, in previous years, we had done everything by paper and photographs, and we haven't done a really good analysis yet, which would be good to do. But we think we're saving between half and 3/4 of the time. They just flew through the work this last year. So it's really been a big efficiency. And that's the presentation. Let me just remind you to please check out the poster and go to the Washington Stormwater website and download everything and check it out. What we're really hoping is that people will download the database and find out where it's missing pieces. Maybe in Eastern Washington there's things that we don't have. Maybe there's modifications the framework needs. But we just really want it to be a regional model that'll work for everyone, and then we can learn from the process.